On July 1st, 2014, in the No Sleep subreddit, Reddit user Nathan wrote a post claiming his dead girlfriend, Emily, is sending him messages on Facebook. Emily died on the 7th of August, 2012 in a car collision. On September 4th, 2013, he received the first of what was to be many messages from his dead girlfriend. It began with a simple hello. According to Nathan, only he and Emily's mother shared admin privileges of Emily's Facebook account. But when it became clear it was not Emily's mother sending the messages, Nathan assumed one of his late girlfriend's friends had hacked into the account. A couple of months later, a second set of messages appeared on Emily's account. Nathan immediately recognized that the messages were snippets of previous conversations he and Emily had posted through Facebook. Then, all of a sudden, things became even more chilling. Nathan began receiving notifications that Emily had tagged herself in a photo. He recognized that Emily would tag herself in spaces where it was plausible for her to be, or where she would usually stand. He contacted Facebook and they told him that the locations her Facebook page had been accessed from since her death were locations that she had been before, such as his home and her mom's home. He changed the Facebook password multiple times and even turned on two-factor authentication. Still, the messages from Emily continued and began to take on a more ominous tone. As the frequency of messages from Emily increased, he became more concerned. Until all of a sudden, Emily used her first original word, a word that had not been recycled from old Facebook messages. It's the freezing, I don't know what's happening here that really makes our blood run cold. Finally, Nathan memorialized Emily's page in effect, closing down access to the Facebook account. This post appeared soon thereafter. This series of messages was especially disturbing for Nathan as parts of the conversation were recycled messages taken from his last post made on the night Emily died. But it still wasn't enough for Emily to rest in peace because she sent Nathan another message. And in this one, she posted a photo which she had taken of him from behind a half-closed door. A photo which, Nathan says, was taken at a time when nobody else was there in the house with him. That's my door. That's my computer. It's taken from outside. Help. On October 26, 1965, Indianapolis police answered a call saying that a girl had died. The caller was a teenaged boy who sounded very nervous and directed the police to the address 3850 East New York Street. When the cops got to the dingy, run-down, clapboard home, they found the emaciated, dead body of 16-year-old Sylvia Marie Likens. She was covered with bruises and small wounds, later revealed to be cigarette and match burns that numbered over 100. There were also large areas where the outer layer of skin had peeled off. Sylvia also had a large numeral 3 branded on her chest. However, the most remarkable injuries by far were the words in block letters that had been burned directly onto her stomach. "I'm a prostitute and proud of it." It all started when Likens' parents, who were carnival workers, had left her and her sister Jenny in the care of the Baniszewski family for $20 a week, 3 months before her death. But when one of their checks arrived late, Baniszewski took out her frustration by beating the girls. Weeks of escalating horror followed. The attacks focused almost exclusively on Sylvia. Several of Baniszewski's children and a gaggle of neighborhood kids, some as young as 10, watched or joined in. Baniszewski encouraged them to torment Sylvia, including, among other things, extinguishing lit cigarettes upon her skin, beating her, tying her up, burning her with scalding water, rubbing salt into her raw wounds, forcing her to eat feces and other substances that would cause her to vomit, forcing her to remove her clothes and insert a glass Coca-Cola bottle into her vagina on at least 2 occasions. On February 2, 1959, 9 ski hikers were found dead on the East Shoulder Mountain, Kolatsiakl, Russia, eerily called the Mountain of Death by the indigenous Mansi people. From the evidence at the scene, it appeared that the hikers had cut open their tents from the inside and fled into the wilderness in just their socks or bare feet. One of the hikers had major skull damage, while a couple more had multiple chest fractures. Despite this, none of the corpses had any signs of a struggle. It gets weirder. Their bodies were stained orange, with massive internal injuries from a force that a doctor studying the incident compared to that of a car crash. And one of the ski hikers was found with her head tilted back, her stretched mouth wide as if emitting a silent scream. Upon closer inspection, the rescuers realized that her tongue had been ripped out by the root, and she was also missing her eyes. As you'd imagine, all sorts of theories to the cause of the deaths have been tried and tested over the years, but the final verdict was that the hikers died of a compelling natural force. What does that even mean? Never has something so ambiguous been so horrifying. There's always that moment of dread when you stick one foot out from under your covers, as you envisage a paranormal activity-style death being dragged down the stairs. You have an instinctive worry with what's under your bed from a young age, even though nothing has ever been under there. One particularly disturbing case was in 2003, when a guest noticed a foul smell in his room at the Capri Motel, Kansas City, and complained to staff. After 3 nights of opening windows and no doubt gallons of Febreze, the stench would not leave, causing the poor guest to vomit in the room. When cleaning crew began shifting furniture to clean the puke, they found the decomposing corpse of a man wearing only a nun's wimple and fishnet stockings. To repeat, he slept in that bed for 3 nights. On January 25, 2014, the Indianapolis Star published a lengthy report on a family terrorized by 3 children allegedly possessed by demons. The account of LaToya Ammons and her family tells disturbing stories of children climbing up the walls, getting thrown across rooms, and children threatening doctors in deep, unnatural voices. It would seem like something straight out of a movie, except all of these accounts were more or less corroborated with nearly 800 pages of official records obtained by the Indianapolis Star and recounted in more than a dozen interviews with police, DCS personnel, psychologists, family members, and a Catholic priest. One of the more chilling sections of the report includes a segment about the possessed 9-year-old. According to Washington's original DCS report, the 9-year-old had a weird grin and walked backward up a wall to the ceiling. He then flipped over Campbell, landing on his feet. He never let go of his grandmother's hand. On September 12, 2008, 2 trains collided in the Chatsworth district of Los Angeles, killing 25 people in the crash. One of the passengers on board was Charles E. Peck, who was traveling from Salt Lake City for a job interview in LA. His hopes were high on landing the job as his fiancée, Andrea Katz, lived in California, and he planned to marry her if he was hired. During the next 11 hours, Peck's mobile phone sent numerous calls to his fiancée, son, brother, stepmother, and sister. Overall, his loved ones received a total of 35 calls. However, each time they answered, they only heard static. When they called back, the calls went straight to voicemail. The family could only be optimistic and assumed Charles was alive in the wreckage and calling for help. When the search team finally traced Peck's phone signal and discovered his body in a lead passenger car, where most major injuries and deaths occurred, they reported that Charles had died on impact and that he couldn't have possibly made the calls. What's even stranger is that they never found the phone. On the night of March 31, 1922, the 6 residents of Hinterkaifeck, a small farmstead in Germany, were murdered with a mattock. The victims were Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria, her children Cecilia and Josef, and the maid Maria Baumgartner. The Grubers' earlier maid left the family 6 months earlier, having claimed the home was haunted. And days before the murder, Andreas told neighbors he'd discovered a strange set of footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the home, but not back. He'd also heard footsteps in the attic, and a set of keys went missing. Based on the crime scene found days after the murders, investigators believed the family was led one by one into the barn to be killed before the murderer killed the maid and young Josef in the house. It is believed that the perpetrator remained at the farm for several days. Someone had fed the cattle and eaten food in the kitchen. The neighbors had also seen smoke from the chimney during the weekend. As creepy as it sounds, the killer was never found. Jack Froist died of a heart arrhythmia in June 2011 at the age of 32. Tragic, but nothing unusual about the story, yet. In November the same year, Jack's friends each received an email from his account, signed with his name. His friends and family are adamant no one knew his passwords. One email implored his friend to clean his attic, which related to a private conversation the two had had shortly before his death. An email to his cousin read, "I knew you were going to break your ankle," an injury that had occurred just a week before the email arrived. Probably a sick hacker, but Jack's relatives and friends said they still have no explanation for the messages and have given up hope trying to find one. Probably the most notorious killer clown in human history, John Wayne Gacy was a Chicago serial killer responsible for the murders of at least 33 young boys. He buried most of the bodies in the crawl space of his house, in his yard, and when he started to run out of space, he dumped them in a nearby river. As Pogo the Clown, Gacy performed at children's parties during his time off from working as a building contractor. In 1972, he brought a teenage boy named Timothy McCoy to his house and killed him. He would go on to lure dozens more to his home, then torture, rape, and murder them. He was later caught in 1978. Imprisoned for life, he started a second career as a painter, creating images of himself in full clown makeup.